Okay, so I want to add a comment to here. One of the things that I'm very frustrated with the current administration is there's a lot of things that have been hindering or digressing the role of women or their professional ability to have a position, shall we say, through retraction of certain grants, or anti-DEI actually prohibits now women from entry in certain areas in a very, very loose way. And obviously, that gives the employers also the right to withdraw from pregnancy leave and other things that women had gained advancement in. And also, not let them have like equal positions after a pregnancy leave, for example. But in the older societies, it feels like it's going backwards, where in the older societies, where I've seen a lot in Latin American culture as they've been coming into the Western world, you have these extended families, the both grandmothers, maybe the grandfather too. You've got the cousins, you've got, aunts, uncles, whatever. And it's a participatory event every day to make meals, and they share, and there's less waste. And there's somebody, whoever is off that hour is helping with house chores, right? Or watching the kids. And one of the things that I saw that was really interesting, this was actually about 20 years ago in Peru, in some of the cities that were coming about. When I went to the farmers market there, the local farmers market, there were many of the older women who couldn't run around as much that were always part of the city. And they were prepping the vegetables at the vegetable stands on the side that their families owned. And they were chopping them and mixing them for different like soups or whatever. And you could buy, here's your base for vegetable soup. With the herbs, fresh herbs, all chopped, right? Which now we see the grocery stores doing here. But the
Hmm.
problem is, there, at least people knew how to cook at home, so they could grab a bag. The stand next door would have chopped bones for making soup broth, right? So they grab those, they go home, throw it in a pot, add water while they're cleaning the house or helping the kids with the homework, and they add in whatever else they want to. But they have their dried spices at home and know how to use the spices from family tradition. We have several generations here ever since latchkey kid syndrome in the 70s, double income, right? At never learned how to cook. And their idea of cooking is what talk show hosts often talked about, where you grab a can of Campbell's soup, and then you can add your vegetables in, which it's better than not, but it was generally add the frozen vegetables into the Campbell's soup, and then you add your noodles or whatever and make your soup, right? And that was a quick college meal, right? Next to ramen. And so now, though, going back to Whole Foods, the question is this society able to, because we've got a very divided family society. There's hardly any families that are not immigrant families that cluster together here, especially in Western worlds, because the further the kids travel, the more successful it's deemed. So your thoughts on that then? How do we reconcile the whole behavior? It's not just about cooking at home now.
Yeah, well, and you bring up this really interesting point of, the real food triangle and the idea. Uh, Really, you can imagine it working in places like Peru and Japan, where you have families cooking together and all that type of stuff, or in the old traditional, American way, where the woman is at home and she's a stay-at-home mom. But the truth is, America today doesn't live in those times or in those places, and so I think that's the disconnect we get about when we talk about who's going to cook. Well, like nobody ever had that question in in some other cultures, and so it shows you how disconnected our culture is from the right way of eating, and that the culture has to be fixed for these dietary guidelines to be met.
Yeah, and to your point, Blake, I think the plurality of cultures makes it difficult to find the common solution to all problems, right? So that's the issue, because there is certain things that certain cultures will do or eat or prepare or be that other cultures don't have. So we have to find out. I mean, I don't know what the answer is. I really don't know what the answer is. I know what I'm doing for me and my family. I know what I'm doing at the health food store that I have, trying to educate people about certain things. But I've since, made the conscious decision to stop passing judgment on people's food choices because I literally don't know what their background is. I don't know what their social stress is, and I don't know what their financial stress is. I don't know what their time, their chronological stresses are. So when I work with them in the store, I just try to find gaps. Supplements aren't the way to live either, right? Like, I mean, that's a fill gap in and of itself. You know, you're trying to plug the leaky dam, you know? So I understand the nature of that. It's just that we're in this gradation of solutions. And I just don't think we can be moralistically punitive to people that can't seem to, onboard, fully cooked, full real meals 24/7, 365. Because I think what that does then is ask people to pull up their bootstraps, but they're not wearing any boots.
Right. And there's a
Well,
lot more than that, because if you talk about, making your own bread, which, because I do so much fermentation, I know the time that it takes with fermentation. Once you get the batches going, that's great. But, between kimchi and kombucha and sourdough, there is a lot of caring and working, because that's when people really have to realize food is a living dynamic and you've got to take care of those microbes, or you could create something poisonous or not have the benefits, and, why bother then, right? Or you end up also wasting a lot of money, and it takes room. You need to have vats, you need to have pans, and you need to have the space for proofing. All of these things that this administration made a comment that goes in the right direction with that pyramid. But what I fear is they're ignoring the emerging science that looks at more and the cultural behavior. And it's further showing the disconnect between the average citizen and what it takes to survive in the modern world, or even the ones that are on the edge of the modern world, like the farmers.
Well, I'll share with you a study, and I can put it in the chat if people want it, but it's a mouse trial, so it's an animal trial, and it looked at blue light and what blue light did to the gut microbiome.
Oof. Yeah.
So it turns out that the environment, so allostatic load in the exposome is the thing that determines whether or not blue light really bothers you or doesn't really bother you. So under the influence of high GI stress, ultra processed food coupled with blue light, bad news. But if you have the blue light, but you have a combined diet, it's not as bad.
You know,
So
yeah,
Yeah.
everything is a combination effect and
linear.
complexity. And it's like, well, to me, it's like the dietary guidelines were like maybe a drop of purity into a bucket of poison, like here we
Do you know
are,
what
like
you
we're
have fun
trying to
with it?
make it, we're trying to make this idyllic standard and everything.
Right.
Look what we're dropping it into. And so then you say, well, going back to gap analysis, it was a useful starting point for a conversation around what is the complexity of our food policy and our food systems, and what is really constitutes the poisonous bucket. Because, one drop of that poison might be, yeah, food additives or ultra processed foods, but there's a lot of other poison in this bucket that nobody wants to deal with, much less the politicians don't want to admit to the real problems that we have.